Hey, I had a lot of fun making this video, but if you just want to skip straight ahead to the part where I do the countdown, just click here. Okay, thanks. Welcome everybody, it's JBrad here, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a throwback. If you were here with me since the very beginning, you probably remember that my very first video was Kingdom Hearts related. It was a countdown video where I talk about the 14 things that I would very much like to see in the franchise going forward, namely the upcoming Kingdom Hearts 4. Funnily enough, the trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4 dropped about 2 years ago, and we haven't really heard a peep of news since then. While I certainly am happy that they're not spoiling everything left and right like they did with Kingdom Hearts 3 and how they handled their trailers and news coverage, a part of me does wish that they would at least, give us something. I think it's safe to say that the one thing that Kingdom Hearts fans are most anxious about is probably the thing that everyone gets the most anxious about when it comes to each new game, and that is the world list. Kingdom Hearts prides itself on incorporating both Disney and Final Fantasy characters together, with most of their levels in the games being based off of a famous Disney property, ranging all the way back from Snow White all the way up to Frozen. Now, of course, with a new game, you would expect there to be a lot of speculation on what those levels might be. And I gotta throw my hat in the ring too, because this is something that I've been considering for a very long time. And by very long time, I mean all the way back to 2002, when the first game came out. Now, if you've seen these types of videos before, you can probably already guess what type of worlds are going to make the cut. But I'm here to tell you that apart from a few mainstay choices within the fan community, expect the unexpected, because I'm going for level choices that'll make people go, no way. Make them jump for joy and cheer at how crazy it is that they managed to make it into the game. Now, of course, in addition to these not being standard choices, expect for the list to not be your standard list either. I had originally planned for this list to just be going like bullet points from 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., but I realized over the course of making it that a lot of the picks that I had were fairly similar to each other in terms of what it was that I was looking for. So instead, the way I'm going to be grouping these is I'm going to be listing different types of worlds that I think each game needs, and within each type, a number of different world choices that I would think fit this bill perfectly. So we're going to start things off with the principal type of world that I think that every Kingdom Hearts game needs, and that is the good old-fashioned adventure world. These are just retellings or remixings of the movie's story where the characters go along while experiencing little bits and bobs of the game's original plot to help move it along or even just help pad out the level. And for this type of world, I have 3 in mind, 2 of which are probably the biggest fan favorites, and those are Atlantis and Treasure Planet. You already knew that these ones were going to be on the list. Here's a pro tip. If the person making this type of video is a millennial, then it's probably 90% likely that they're going to end up on this list. And by they, I mean both of them, because when it comes to the Disney and Kingdom Hearts fan communities at large, they're kind of a package deal. And if you can believe it, Treasure Planet was actually supposedly going to end up in Dream Drop Distance. A whole bunch of unused assets for what people believe to be the ship from the movie were discovered in the coding of the game. So an attempt was definitely made. And I don't blame them either, because Treasure Planet along with Atlantis both have mainstays of the Kingdom Hearts franchise. You have hub areas, unique methods of transportation, different locations for platforming opportunities. You have great main characters, great ensemble casts, and probably 2 of the best villains that Disney has had, at least I think so. And not only were they really good, but they also happen to be twist villains long before twist villains kind of became a trend for Disney for a while. Although I don't really know if I would consider Long John Silver a twist villain, because Treasure Island's like a scabillion years old. And another thing that these movies both feature that I think play very well into the themes of Kingdom Hearts is growth through exploration. Both Atlantis and Treasure Planet are about boldly going where no young boy has gone before. And so Sora would be right at home here. In fact, that's how his journey began, with him wanting to explore the outside world on a little itty-bitty raft. It's no wonder that he has a strong infatuation with pirates. And of course, with Atlantis, you would have a very awesome boss fight with the Leviathan. Now, I mentioned a third movie in this category, but this third one is going to be my wild card.
You've earned it.
Not only is it an underrated gem for modern Disney, and not only does it possess all of the great tropes of classical heroism and adventure, some might consider it to be the first isekai story, and that is John Carter of Mars. I think that it is a travesty that this movie failed as hard as it did. Although I don't really fault modern audiences for seeing the name John Carter and not knowing who the heck that is, since most people don't know about the John Carter of Mars book series. Personally, I think that they should have gone with the book title Swords of Mars. So much more badass on a movie poster. Now, for any of you who have read the books or seen the movie, you'll probably remember that in the story, Martian gravity causes John Carter to jump really high and far away. And so if you thought Sora was floaty before, or that flow motion was overpowered, wait until he goes to Mars. Now, there is a bit of a complication given how Disney actually lost the film rights to the John Carter series a while back, and I highly doubt that after the fiasco that was Tarzan, that the Edgar Rice Bros estate will want to lend it back to them. But hey, a man can dream, and it's my list anyway. Also, this movie has a unique thing going for it that I will be touching upon later in the video. Now, before we move on to the next set of worlds, I would like to give out some honorable mentions. The first set of honorable mentions are Moana, Coco, Inside Out, Encanto, Raya and the Last Dragon, and Zootopia. I'm sure they might make good levels, but I just simply have no emotional attachment to these movies whatsoever. What can I say? I'm not a zoomer. Now, for the second type of world, these are going to be some that I think a lot of you in the audience are going to be very interested in, and that is returning worlds. These are going to be the worlds where the characters are going to recognize Sora, Sora is going to recognize the setting, and will likely get to continue plot threads from previous games. Now, the first one on this list would have to be Wreck-It Ralph. Now, despite what I said earlier in the video about not wanting to go with obvious choices, this one seems a bit of an inevitability to me, mostly due to the fact that he was a summon in Kingdom Hearts 3. And the series demonstrates that there's plenty of precedent for a summon character to have a world featured later in the series. There was Simba, Mushu, trying to think of who else, Stitch, and Peter Pan. Yeah, I guess that Ralph would be the next logical choice. Plus, his world was already featured in Union Cross. Now granted, it would probably be a little bit weird to rehash the plot from the level in a previous game, which rehashed the plot for the movie, or maybe not, I don't know. The way that things work in Union Cross is kind of iffy. But hey, within the level, you would get things like Fix-It Felix Jr., you would get Hero's Duty, you would get Sugar Rush. All of those games within a game could then be mini games later on. Although I gotta say that the main reason why I want to include this world is because I want to see Sora and Ralph reunite, kind of like how Mushu and the gang did in Land of Dragons.
Sora, Donald, Goofy!
Do you know them?
Know them? Man, we used to kick all kinds of bad guy butt together.
I'm just a sucker for those scenes where returning characters reference previous games like that. It makes the whole journey feel kind of worth it in the end. Although, if I'm being candid, I did find his summon really awkward to use in 3, so I think it would be a lot better to just simply have him as a party member. Now, the second returning world that I want to see featured game is a little bit closer to my heart, and that would be Alice in Wonderland, namely the Tim Burton version. I'm actually surprised more people don't vocally support the idea for this one, considering how it was quite literally the very first Disney World that we actually visit in the entire franchise. That is, of course, if you're playing the game correctly and don't head to Olympus Coliseum first. And also, the movie itself does basically function as a sequel to the story featured in the first game. And so it would actually be a logical follow-up given how much time has passed since both Alice and Sora will have visited there. Alice is older, Sora's older. The world of Underland has changed tremendously since both of them have gone. And since we're unlikely to see Nightmare Before Christmas again, why not bring Tim Burton back into the mix? The world is gorgeous. You've got the spooky forests, you've got the chessboard, you got the White Queen's castle, the Red Queen's castle, you get the Jabberwocky boss fight, and on top of all of that, Alice herself could be a party member. And how cool would that be, having her fight alongside you with her sword and shield, when in the first game she was just a damsel in distress? I think it would be a very neat way to bring the story full circle. The third returning movie is one that I actually think is absolutely necessary, and that would have to be Tron. I personally think that it was wrong of them to use Tron Legacy for Dream Drop Distance and not save it for Kingdom Hearts 3, given how the graphical upgrade for both the movie and the PS4 seems like it would have been a much more natural fit. But more so than that, in Dream Drop Distance, Tron sort of dies? Like, can we rescue Tron? He was, one of the best characters in KH2, and then he goes bad in Dream Drop Distance, and then he just sort of dies? No, I'm sorry, but I need closure on this one. And so what better way to remedy this situation than through the Tron Uprising television show? The story is about a young program named Beck getting entangled in this underground movement within the grid against some oppressive militaristic force. He gets trained by Tron to adopt his persona and instill hope in the people to fight back. And I don't know about you, but I think this would be right up Sora's alley. We can keep the Beck character. I don't think it really matters whether he's in it or not, because if he's not in it, then they can just have Sora adopt this role. Also, the show itself is a betwequel that takes place between Tron and Tron Legacy. But I don't really think that this would be too big of an issue, because at the end of both Legacy and Dream Drop, they defeat Clue. And so you could retrofit the plot for the story to be about this scramble for power after the defeat of Clue. And so it would have everything feeling very, very fresh, because you would have Sora basically interacting with all of these new characters and villains, with the only real through line being Tron. And having Sora participate in this sort of revolution and fighting for the users and everything like that, I think it would go a long way to show just how much that Sora has matured. Now, number 4, ironically enough, is one that I think should have been in 3, and that is Aladdin, King of Thieves. This one doesn't really need a whole lot of explaining, in my opinion. Really, it's just a matter of them doing the first 2 movies and then not doing the third one. It's a simple story where Aladdin and Jasmine are getting married. Aladdin meets his dad, Kasim. His dad is maybe not the best guy in the world. He's the leader of the 40 Thieves and all. And they go on this long, crazy journey to this mystical city where they have to chase down this MacGuffin, fight this bad guy, and everything basically works out in the end. It's basically Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But in that regard, it's a very easy story, so why not do it? I think we at least deserve a real conclusive ending for Aladdin like we got for Hercules, especially after the rather mediocre second outing in Kingdom Hearts 2 based on a rather mediocre second movie. Now, before we go to the next section, I have some more honorable mentions. Next up for honorable mentions, we have Gargoyles, The Incredibles, and The Black Cauldron. Now, my main issue is that even though I really do like all 3 of these things, I just feel that they're too similar to levels that we've already had before, and by that I mean levels that people aren't really clamoring for a return to. We had a big metropolis with San Francisco. We had 3 fairy tale castles in Birth by Sleep, and so bringing these types of levels back without much of a unique hook to them would be a bit of a waste, in my opinion. However, all 3 of these feature incredibly badass villains that I think would be very, very cool to have in some sort of Disney villain cabal 2.0. Of course, it would have to be led by David Xanatos. Now, speaking of hooks, the third choice is Neverland Again. No, I'm joking. Neverland Again, more like Never Again. But all kidding aside, the next batch of worlds would have to be gimmick worlds. Now, these ones are based off of a certain gameplay mechanic, specifically ones that are basically featured in every game already. One example would be musical worlds. This is a world that is basically built around rhythm minigames. You know, this would be your Make My Music, Melody Time, Saludos Amigos, and Three Caballeros. And my personal pick, Fantasia 2000. I think that Symphony of Sorcery from Dream Drop Distance has got to be easily one of the most underappreciated levels in the history of the franchise. And so while it technically is a returning world, I think it fits better here. Now after that, we have books. Now if you remember the 100 Acre Wood levels, you remember that the way you would progress through the level is that you would find different torn pages from the books scattered throughout the game. And as you would find each page and return to the book, it would unlock a new little mini level for you to explore through. Many times they would feature these games centered around them. And by completing the game, you sort of expand the story a bit. But 100 Acre Wood is basically concluded at this point. And so I think that the three choices to replace 100 Acre Wood would have to be Robin Hood, The Jungle Book, which almost made it into Birth by Sleep, and the criminally underrated James and the Giant Peach. The first two I got the idea for when I noticed that both of them feature these books that open up and take you into the story in the beginning of the movie, but also because, like 100 Acre Wood, all three of these movies feature large supporting casts and an equally large number of set pieces. And so theoretically, you could replicate the torn page mechanic and have a single character dedicated to a single location in the story, and then just basically play things out from there. And then last but not least, for gimmick worlds, there is one that, again, should have been in 3, and that is an arena world. Now, speaking of played out worlds, as much as Hercules is my favorite Disney Renaissance movie, and as much as I believe that the Olympus Coliseum is one of the most iconic locations in the Kingdom Hearts franchise, it's done. And not only is it done, but it kind of finished on a bittersweet note. Sweet insofar as the level for Kingdom Hearts 3 had a really good story and level design, but bitter in that it did probably the worst thing it could have done, and that is not actually having an Olympus Coliseum inside Olympus Coliseum. Like, what the hell, Square? You had the perfect opportunity and you fumbled. People were so bummed out about this that the mod community basically had to create this colossal coliseum for you to participate in from scratch. Granted, as far as mods go, it was very well done, but again, this should have been in the original game. I'm sorry, but there's just no excuse. And so if Hercules is done too, then what could we have to replace it? Remember what I said earlier about John Carter of Mars? Well, the movie itself featured a large coliseum there, so why not use that? But while we're on the subject of space exploration, remember the Mirage Arena? Of course you do. You played the games, you know these things. Well, anyway, I couldn't really think of a way to incorporate the Mirage Arena into a theoretical new game, and so I thought, well, if we can't do that either, then what other options do we have? And then it hit me. Star Command from Buzz Lightyear. The Buzz Lightyear movie from Pixar was total garbage, but you could take the Buzz Lightyear of Star Command cartoon, particularly the pilot movie, or hell, even just the general lore of the character, and craft a very fun and unique narrative around it. The whole point of the space station itself is to train future space rangers, so why not have this crazy giant room with lots of wild platforming opportunities and enemies to fight? It would basically be like the X-Men Danger Room. Okay, so now before we move on to the final portion of Worlds, I have one last set of honorable mentions, and those would be The Great Mouse Detective, The Emperor's New Groove, The Princess and the Frog, The Rescuers, and The Pocahontas. Sorry. Now the reasoning behind these are fairly simple. Even though I did like all of these movies too, I think that these worlds actually should have been used in the side games on the handhelds from the previous generation. Although, I would totally not be against them being featured as cameos. Now, for the final batch of worlds, I think that we should go with something that is a little bit more in line with the original worlds that were featured in the previous games, namely Traverse Town, Twilight Town, and Radiant Garden. Except these will be different because even though they are technically original, they'll be featuring a lot of plot threads and characters from multiple Disney movies at once. I call them amalgam worlds. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, we're going to be using the first one as an example, and that would be Quadrum. Now, we don't know anything about Quadrum other than it's going to supposedly be the hub world for Kingdom Hearts 4, and that it's basically going to be based off of Shibuya in Japan. And so naturally, a lot of people are going into this thinking that it's going to feature the World Ends With You characters, like in Dream Drop Distance. After all, at the end of that level, Neku does say,
"See you in Shibuya."
Sure, it's a deal.
Although granted, it's not technically Shibuya, but it's Shibuya. Now I'm thinking, hey, why end it at The World Ends With You? Why not have Quadrum act as this sort of gathering point for lesser known Square Enix characters, kind of like what Traverse Town did. These characters would of course be included from The World Ends With You, as previously mentioned, The Bouncer, and Parasite Eve. Why did I choose these three? Well, for one, all three of these stories take place in big cities already. And two, all of these characters were designed by Tetsuya Nomura himself. Supposedly, Ayabrea, the main character from Parasite Eve, was going to be one of the characters featured in Traverse Town anyway. Now, as much as I would like to include gargoyles in this level, it became very clear to me the more I thought about it that this level, Quadrum, should be utilized to scratch an itch that fans of Kingdom Hearts have had for a very long time, and that is having a world dedicated to Final Fantasy. I don't really think you could have a level based on a single game because those games often tend to be really super long, and so I think having a world dedicated to non-Final Fantasy characters would be just as interesting. Although, I certainly wouldn't mind the fellows from Final Fantasy 15 just dropping by. Now for this next amalgam world, we're going to be getting a little bit spooky. I am of course talking about the Haunted Mansion. Now I know that the original Haunted Mansion movie was pretty terrible, and I don't believe that the recent remake could really possibly be that much better.
What?
But that was mostly because they focused a bit too much on the family that they made up for the movie, rather than balancing it with references from the beloved ride. Scrap that plot element altogether and have the story focus on Sora, Donald, and Goofy exploring the mansion by themselves. And building off of that, you could then supplement the story by incorporating a lot of plot elements from variations of the Haunted Mansion ride from other Disney parks, namely the Phantom Manor found at Disney World Paris and the Mystic Manor found at Disneyland in Hong Kong. The Phantom Manor is easily the darkest of the bunch. It has a murder mystery, a weeping widow, a doomed romance.
The French.
Whereas the Mystic Manor is a lot more lighthearted since in Chinese culture, they don't really take kindly to ghost stories. And so everything is focused on what is ostensibly a museum of magical artifacts that were collected and curated by this English explorer guy. Some people who are experts in the Disney parks would even tell you that these versions of the ride are actually superior to the original. But the third slice of bread on this ghostly Big Mac of a level would be the incorporation of another popular Disney ride, the Tower of Terror. The Japanese version of which actually features a fairly similar plot to that of the Mystic Manor, albeit a lot more spooky and scary. And of course, the collector guy in this version not being so nice or pleasant. My vision for this level would basically have some sort of multi-generational story wherein, you have the original Haunted Mansion, maybe the Mystic Museum built around it, and then having the Tower of Terror added behind it. so that it becomes this like ultra mega haunted building. Mix it all together, maybe throw in a headless horseman boss fight since he was actually supposed to be originally featured in the original Haunted Mansion. Maybe connect his missing head to the Hatbox Ghost. If you couldn't get him though, that's okay. Ramsley works just as well. In fact, I had an idea for a Ramsley boss fight wherein it initially takes place at the top of the Tower of Terror, followed by the sequence where he gets sucked down into hell or wherever. You would fight him through the tower because it's like the part in the ride where you drop really far, but it would play out like the boss fights from the world dive sequences from Dream Drop distance. You know, as sort of a cool callback on top of a cool reference. Now, if you, the viewer, will indulge me in my shameless fanfiction, the next world is probably the one that I've thought about the most. So we've explored Disney Castle, we've explored Disney Town, we've even explored Timeless River. Well, I feel that we can take the idea of a Disney-inspired area and go above and beyond, namely, a reinvention of Disney Town in the form of a 1940s inspired city, incorporating the plots for things like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Oliver and Company, Darkwing Duck, and Dick Tracy, all revolving around a plot that's very reminiscent of classic noir films, with things like hard-boiled detectives, organized crime, and femme fatales. Think stuff like Chinatown, LA Confidential, and The Untouchables. I would probably call it something like, I don't know, Disneyville or something like that. And the main character would actually be Bonkers. So you would have Bonkers as like this low-level beat cop who's sort of disrespected and, you know, put down by everybody else on the force. And then Jenny Foxworth from Oliver and Company comes in with these missing posters for her little orange cat Oliver. And Bonkers, you know, being an orange cat, decides that this could be his chance to prove to everyone on the force that he's actually worth something, and he talks to Police Chief Dick Tracy about taking up the mission himself. And of course, Tracy would take it up because the whole thing is tied to Bill Sykes, who would basically be sort of this Al Capone type of character running the show as far as organized crime is concerned. And in the city, you would basically have this sort of conflict going on between regular people and toons. So, you know, it would kind of be like a metaphor of some kind. You know, this neighborhood was really nice until all of the toons started moving in. And fighting on behalf of Sykes would be his right-hand man, or should I say right-hand woman,
Anita, darling!
Cruella DeVille. The young version, of course. She would basically be like his attack dog who robs banks and gets into shootouts with the police. And so Sora, Donald, and Goofy would get recruited into Dick Tracy's crusade against Sykes and his criminal empire. And you could also have like Tiana from Princess and the Frog. Again, bear with me on this. So you would have Tiana from Princess and the Frog as like a lounge singer for Sykes in his nightclub. And throughout the whole thing, Dick Tracy would be very mean and hard on Bonkers, kind of like in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And, you know, Sora can eventually be like, hey, dude, why are you like so mean to him? Why you always got to be hard on him? And Dick Tracy can be like, well, you know, I used to work with toons. In fact, my partner against crime, he used to be the best of us until he disappeared, and now everything's all gone to hell, and then it would turn out that the hero that he's talking about would be Darkwing Duck. And so there would be this sort of like Duck Knight Returns type of story. Again, I'm really sorry that you had to listen to my ridiculous fanfiction idea. Would you believe me if I told you that I was able to come up with basically the entire plot to the story by listening to the theme song for Cowboy Bebop twice? Again, if you think it was a really terrible idea or a great idea, I would love to hear about it. But that's enough of that. Now on to the final world. No, not that final world, you know what I mean. And so, for the final world, my idea is to have Kingdom Hearts explore a setting that somehow, some way, has never been done in a Kingdom Hearts game before. A setting that is not only rich and deep in lore and opportunity for exploration, but is also just so American. You thought that Sora enjoyed being a pirate. Wait until he gets to be a cowboy. I would call this world Thunder Mesa. The name itself is derived from the fictional location that the Frontierland portions of the Disney parks take place in. Kingdom Hearts fans probably recognize the name best from the Big Thunder Mountain Summon, which has always been one of Frontierland's biggest attractions. This world would have everything: the Lone Ranger, Pecos Bill, Paul Bunyan, John Henry, Boundin, Home on the Range, Country Bears, Davy Crockett, and even Zorro. Did you know that Disney actually used to make a lot of really cool Zorro stuff? He was a character at the parks for the longest time. They would have this show where a guy dressed as Zorro would fight bad guys on the railings and rooftops of the buildings there. Old Yeller, or I don't know, maybe the Apple Dumpling Gang. But you get what I'm saying, right? And so I'm thinking, why not have this big expansive area where Sora and the gang can not only explore the vast desert areas of the Wild West, but also typical tropes such as boom towns, saloons, rodeos, some kind of like a mine shaft, maybe some sort of gorgeous Rocky Mountain area or Yukon inspired area. Maybe have a Brother Bear cameo in there. You know, you could have cowboys, bandits, Indians, mountain men, a train robbery of some kind, stuff from various tall tales, all of that really fun and exciting, awesome, boyish stuff. And if we are going with Star Command, we can then use this as a reason to incorporate a lot of, you know, Woody's Roundup type references. I would personally love to see Sora and the gang wear various Western inspired outfits. And I also just really would like more history to be involved in the creative process when it comes to world selection. If I'm being honest, one of the reasons why Kingdom Hearts 3 felt really empty in a lot of ways to me is because it's not simply that the movies that were featured were fairly recent, but they also felt very safe and predictable. I don't want for each Kingdom Hearts game to wait 15 years before coming out just so that Disney can have enough time to release stuff to put in it. I certainly don't want any of the remakes, that's for sure. I also think that Kingdom Hearts as a franchise has the potential to do a lot of good for a lot of Disney movies that, if we're being quite honest, did not live up to expectations. They either did not perform well at the box office or they got panned in the reviews, but all of the issues that they had as movies were issues that they had as movies. Their problems have nothing to do with things like video game or level design. And because the Kingdom Hearts games often rewrite the plots to Disney movies anyway, any plot holes or bad story beats can simply be reworked or ironed out. There are a ton of movies that could make fantastic worlds, even if they weren't good films. And given how Kingdom Hearts as a franchise is structured, you could use it as a sort of redemption for a lot of these movies. Perhaps give them a second life and help elevate them to, at the very least, cult status. How many people who were too skittish to go see them in theaters saw them on Disney Plus and thought, what the hell, this movie's really good. I wish I had seen it in theaters. Well, now we can help aid in this process by having really, really good levels based around them. And before you go and say, well, they're not popular though, was Tron popular back in 2005? The first Tron was not a big success at the box office either. It was sort of like this weird cult film, and believe it or not, was actually the first movie choice for Kingdom Hearts 2. And now it's regarded as one of the best levels in the entire series for how it's worked into the plot of the game. I mean, do you really expect me to believe that for all its faults, the Nutcracker and the Four Realms couldn't make a very good video game level? Again, I want things that are completely out of left field and shock everybody and develop buzz and chatter and expectation and perhaps even a little bit of controversy, rather than just having soulish cash grabs that everyone just sort of rolls their eyes and say, oh yeah, of course it was going to make it in. But that is all just my opinion. I would love to hear from all of you what world choices you would like to see in future Kingdom Hearts games, especially if it's something that's just totally out there. Now, of course, before you ask me, but what about Star Wars and Marvel? No. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, by all means support me on Patreon for as low as $1 a month. All patrons enter for a chance to get a special shout out in each video, and this video's special shout out goes to Hux Deluxe. Thank you very much, Hux Deluxe, and thanks to all of you who watched. Until next time, this is J Brad, signing out.